It was the most important room in Britain, and almost no one knew it existed. Beneath the streets of Westminster, shielded by layers of concrete and secrecy, the British government built a hidden command center that would decide the fate of World War II. Here, surrounded by maps, typewriters, and the constant echo of air raid sirens, Winston Churchill and his generals fought not with weapons, but with words, strategy, and resolve. They called it the Cabinet War Rooms, and it was the beating heart of Britain's resistance. The birth of a fortress beneath London. In 1938, as tensions with Nazi Germany grew, British planners faced an uncomfortable truth. London would be the first target in the next war. The government needed a safe place for its top leaders to operate if the capital came under attack. Engineers scoured the city for a location that could survive bombs, yet remain close enough to Parliament and Buckingham Palace for immediate coordination. They found it under the Treasury building, solid foundations, reinforced basements, and quick access to Downing Street. Work began in August 1938 under strict secrecy. The goal? A fully functional, self-contained war headquarters that could run Britain even if the city above was burning. By the time war broke out in September 1939, the underground fortress was ready. Into the nerve center. Those who descended the narrow stairs entered a world of silence and tension. The walls were lined with cork for soundproofing. The air was heavy, filtered through improvised ventilation ducts. At its core stood the map room, a rectangular chamber filled with enormous wall maps marked by colored pins and string lines. Each mark represented ships, aircraft squadrons, or troop movements across the world. It was here that Churchill's staff tracked every convoy crossing the Atlantic, every battle in North Africa, and every night's bombing raid. The map room never slept. Officers worked in shifts 24 hours a day, maintaining real-time updates for Churchill and the chiefs of staff. If Britain had a brain during the war, this was it. Churchill takes command. When Winston Churchill became Prime Minister in May 1940, the war rooms transformed from a precaution into a command post. France was collapsing. Dunkirk was underway. London braced for invasion. Churchill moved in almost immediately. He turned one small, windowless chamber into his personal headquarters, a room that still bears the marks of his cigars on the desk. Here, he dictated speeches, planned naval operations, and sometimes even slept, though he preferred to stay at 10 Downing Street. Staff nicknamed the war rooms the Hole. To Churchill, it was his command ship in the storm. The map room. War in real time. Inside the map room, the war unfolded hour by hour. Every morning, Churchill received a folder summarizing the world situation, prepared by the duty officers overnight. He called it "My Daily Bible." Colored string traced the front lines from France to Burma. Small paper flags marked the positions of ships and submarines. Even telephone cables were color-coded. Red for the Admiralty, blue for the Air Ministry, green for the War Office. The staff who worked there rarely saw daylight. Some didn't leave for weeks at a time. They lived among the hum of typewriters and the steady ticking of wall clocks. In one corner hung a single sign, stark and simple: "Silence is golden." The War Cabinet Room. Next to the map room was the War Cabinet Room, where Churchill met with his ministers and military chiefs. It was a narrow chamber with a long wooden table, surrounded by telephones, ashtrays, and maps pinned to the walls. It was here that the decisions were made that changed history: whether to fight on after Dunkirk, how to defend the skies in the Battle of Britain, when to begin the D-Day landings. Churchill would often sit at the head of the table, cigar in hand, voice rising as he thundered through arguments. He once told his staff, "This room is the engine room of victory." To many who worked there, it felt like standing inside the mind of the war itself. The switchboard to the world. Just beyond the main chambers was another marvel, a private switchboard known as the transatlantic telephone room. Hidden behind a decoy lavatory door marked private, it housed one of the most advanced communication systems of its time. Inside, soundproof walls enclosed a single secure line, the direct link between Churchill and US President Franklin D. Roosevelt. They used a top-secret voice scrambling system known as SIG-SAILI, developed by Bell Labs. It digitally encrypted their voices, decades ahead of its time. From that hidden room, Churchill and Roosevelt coordinated everything from Lend-Lease shipments to the invasion of Normandy. No one else was allowed to listen. Life underground. Life in the war rooms was claustrophobic, exhausting, and strangely ordinary. Staff officers, typists, and clerks worked around the clock, eating rations and sleeping in bunk beds built into the tunnels. The air was stale, condensation dripped from the ceilings. One typist later recalled, "We never knew if it was day or night. We only knew the war was still going." Despite the tension, there were moments of humor. Churchill insisted on hot meals and whiskey even during air raids. He had a personal kitchen installed, one of the few rooms with electric heating, and his cook famously refused to wear a helmet. The Prime Minister's bedroom, still preserved today, includes a desk, a camp bed, and a red telephone for emergency calls. He used it to speak to the king and occasionally to the president, without ever stepping outside. The Blitz. When the Blitz began in September 1940, London was hit night after night. Explosions rattled the walls, dust fell from the ceilings, and the entire war rooms shook. Yet operations never stopped. Churchill often visited during raids, standing beside his staff as bombs fell overhead. He once told an aide, "These are the times we must show our steel." The atmosphere was surreal, muffled thuds above, quiet efficiency below. Even as the city burned, the machinery of command never missed a beat. The turning point. By 1943, the tide had begun to turn. The Allies had won in North Africa, invaded Italy, and were preparing for the liberation of Europe. The war rooms evolved with the front lines. New maps tracked the progress of Operation Overlord. When D-Day began on June 6, 1944, the map-room staff worked non-stop, updating positions of ships and troops as reports came in. That night, Churchill entered the room and said quietly, "We are here to witness history." The tension was unbearable. For hours, no one knew if the landings would succeed. Then, as the reports improved, the entire room seemed to exhale at once. For the first time in years, hope felt real. The end of the Underground War. When Germany finally surrendered on May 8, 1945, Churchill delivered his victory speech to the nation above ground, but the war rooms below were still active. Staff continued recording movements, issuing orders, maintaining contact with fleets still at sea. Only when Japan surrendered in August did the lights finally dim. Then, almost overnight, the rooms were sealed. Maps remained pinned to walls. Pencils sat beside telephones. It was as if time itself had stopped. For decades, only a handful of people even remembered they existed. Rediscovery. In 1984, the Imperial War Museum opened the preserved war rooms to the public. Visitors were astonished to find everything untouched: the maps, the furniture, even Churchill's wartime bed. Today, the Churchill War Rooms Museum stands as one of the most authentic time capsules of World War II. Every hallway feels alive with whispers of history, of decisions that shaped nations and men who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders. Inside, the faint smell of tobacco still lingers. The clocks are frozen at the exact times the war ended in Europe, and on Churchill's desk, the cigar burn remains, a small, perfect reminder that even in darkness, he refused to be extinguished. Legacy. The war rooms were more than a bunker. They were a symbol of leadership under fire, proof that command could endure even when the world above was collapsing. Their design inspired Cold War bunkers in both East and West. Their communication systems paved the way for modern, secure lines used by governments today. But their greatest legacy is psychological, a testament to calm in chaos, to endurance under pressure, to the belief that information and discipline can overcome fear. When people speak of British resolve, they're speaking of this place. Reflection. The world remembers battles, weapons, and victories. But sometimes, the most powerful front line is a quiet room filled with voices deciding the fate of millions. The men and women who worked beneath London's streets never carried rifles or flew planes, yet their vigilance helped win the war. In the stillness of the war rooms, history was written not in gunfire, but in ink, radio signals, and willpower. Even now, if you stand there in silence, you can almost hear it. The low hum of typewriters, the shuffling of papers, the voice of Churchill saying, "Never give in." And above that quiet defiance, London still stands, because down below, they never stopped fighting.